Hi, families. Welcome. We are here today to go over SIOP, which means Shelter Instruction Observation Protocol for English Language Learners. We're going to talk about strategies that you can use to help your child with nonfiction text. We're going to tell you how you can have book walks and talk with your child to go over strategies. And although these strategies are related to SIOP, these strategies are universal for all students. Why nonfiction text?
Hello, families. So today we're going to be using nonfiction text to lead a book talk with your child. You might be wondering, why did we select nonfiction text? Well, there's a large amount of evidence that states that when children read informational text, they increase their reading achievement. It teaches children how to develop more complex thinking. It builds comprehension, and it boosts vocabulary. If you have a child who's a reluctant reader, if you allow your child to select a book that's based on their interest, you're going to find that you're going to have an enthusiastic reader. When children read books that they choose, they're definitely more engaged and invested. And when they're invested, then they're going to be encouraged to work through that text to figure out those unknown words. Now, whether your child is interested in learning about animals, sports, a celebrity, or a science concept, you can find a nonfiction book that's going to be a perfect match for your child.
So today you're going to hear from three of us. Ms. Hernandez is going to go over strategies for kindergarten through second grade. And as we said, these strategies are universal for all students, but the book that she'll be sharing is catered to kindergarten through second grade. I, Ms. Williamson, the book that I will go over is catered towards third through fifth grade, and Ms. Banks' book will cater towards sixth through eighth grade.
All right, team, can you see my book? Great.
Yes.
All right, so parents, you can see that I selected a book on dolphins. Many children in kindergarten through second grade are interested in nonfiction text, especially about animals. Now, I am the district literacy coach and I work with K through 2, so that K through 2 is my crew. And so these students are definitely really interested in learning about animals. And one of the things is that when you are reading a nonfiction text with your child, before you read, you want to, even if you're reading a fiction book, you want to take time to just look at the cover. You want to discuss the cover of the book to activate your child's prior knowledge about the topic, and maybe ask your child what they already know. Next, you might want to ask your child what they want to learn about the topic. You can ask your child to complete the thought, I wonder. Maybe they'll say, I wonder if dolphins live in families. Maybe they'll say, I wonder what animals eat. Using this I wonder strategy helps your child connect with the text, and it builds their interest in learning more about the topic. Now, as we scroll through the book, we're going to just talk about a couple of features that you'll find in a nonfiction text. So the book is loading. Thank you for being patient. And here we have the table of contents. And when you see the table of contents, for the kindergarten through second graders, you want to just talk about what a table of contents is and just let them know that it's going to tell us where we can find information in the book. And when you look at this, you might want to say, oh, look, if I wanted to know how dolphins eat, I would look at page 15. So you just want to just really informally just have a brief little discussion about a table of contents and what it means for your child. So now I'm going to move over to page number 5. You'll notice that there is a bolded word. And children, starting in kindergarten, teachers are talking about bolded words. One important distinction to talk about is that when you see a bolded word in a nonfiction text, it means that it's a new word, or possibly a word that's going to be in the glossary. Versus in a fiction book, a bolded word means that it's a word that you should place a lot of emphasis on. So a bolded word in a nonfiction book, you want to just explain to your child that this is a word that is going to be new for us, or a word that's going to be in the glossary. And you'll notice in nonfiction texts, what I love about them is that they're just full of rich illustrations. So we're going to move on to page number 8. And here you notice these arrows. Here's another nonfiction text feature. You can talk to your children about how sometimes in nonfiction books, there's labels. Not only is this a bolded word that's probably going to be in the glossary and it's a new word for us, but it gives you more information about what a fluke looks like. So you'll continue to read, and this is a book that was chosen for K through 2 because of the text. It's not lots of words. It's just enough information for them to learn about a topic and to stay engaged. So I'm going to go over to page number 13. And here's another label along with a bolded word, which means it's a new word, a blowhole. And with this page, I might talk to my children about, dolphins use blowholes to breathe. How do we breathe? And your child would probably answer like by using their nose. So this allows another way for your child to build a connection with the text and kind of build on their background knowledge. And I always like to tell the children that, especially like, look at this picture. When you look at these nonfiction photos and illustrations, you get an up close idea and an up close picture of something that you may never experience in your life. How many of us have swam with dolphins? I haven't yet, but if I'm able to use this book to be able to say, wow, look at how many teeth they have. So this book just gives your children another experience and another way to learn. Nonfiction text is great. So as you scroll through the book and you read to your children, you can stop along the way and have a discussion with them about things that they're learning, things that maybe surprise them. And here is the glossary. So you can also highlight like, oh, look, there's the blowhole. That was one of the bolded words. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and let Miss Williamson take over. And thank you, parents, for joining me on the K through 2 book walk.
You're muted.
Miss Willie, yep, there's Miss Williamson.
Okay, families, I am going to begin to share my screen. And as you can see, the book that I chose is called Jackie Robinson, A Life of Determination. And again, you can always look at the cover of the book and you can say, what do you ask your child questions like, what do you think this book is about? So that is using the strategy of prediction. Okay, just by viewing the pictures and determining what do you think is going to happen next, or what kinds of things that you think you're going to see or hear about in the story. As you scroll on, again, there are typically the table of contents. And again, in the table of contents, you will see the different chapters and you can ask your child, okay, if you wanted to find something about the major leagues, what page would you look to? And again, all of that stuff is listed in the table of contents. You can ask your child questions like, well, how many chapters are there? Because that's also incorporating math in the strategy because you're counting how many chapters you may see or looking to see how many pages there are within the text. Sorry. Okay. Also, pay close attention to the bolded words. The bolded words are the vocabulary, and they highlight the vocabulary for discussion. Okay, well, what do these words mean? What kind of context clues could you use to determine the meaning? Because oftentimes, even if a child reads a word and they are unsure of the meaning of the word, you can use your context clues and determine based upon what's on that page and what it's saying, you can determine the meaning of those bold-faced words. Also, when you focus on dates, when you see dates in a story, that can bring up the term of thinking about making a timeline. Okay, when you are reading it, as your child is reading, you can encourage them to create graphic organizers, and there are many different graphic organizers that can be used, but one type of graphic organizer is a timeline, and the timeline basically just shows you the different events that are happening in the sequence within a story or a text. You can also relate a timeline to things that have happened in your child's life, where they can maybe create a timeline of their lives with pictures from past to present. Okay. Also, another graphic organizer that you can use is a Venn diagram. A Venn diagram is where you are comparing and contrasting things that have happened in a story or things that have happened in your lives. And I'm also going to share some pictures of those two different types of graphic organizers that I have discussed with you all. So all of these are good strategies. And again, they are universal. So they're not only catered to the grade levels of the books that we have chosen, but they are universal and they can cater towards any of your children, not just English language learners, but they are catered towards all students. So Ms. Williams, I'm going to show you a few different graphic organizers. So right here, we see that this is an example of a Venn diagram. And again, a Venn diagram is just showing you how you can have two different topics, you can have two different stories, you can have two different events. They can compare anything. So as you see, as listed, on one side, you would put the heading of one thing. So the one that I'm showing you is comparing amphibians and reptiles. So here you would have how the things that cater towards amphibians. On the other side, you could have things that cater towards reptiles and their qualities. And in the middle, where the circles are connected, that is where you would see how they are similar. Those attributes are things that they have in common. And you can do those things within a story. So they could compare how baseball, if they were reading the story Jackie Robinson, for example, that I've shared, they could compare how baseball is, how it was back when Jackie Robinson was alive and playing, and how baseball is going on now. And then they could say how things were different. And in the middle, they would say how they are the same.
Miss Williamson, if I could chime in on this
Yes,
Venn diagram, parents, all the things that Miss Williamson was talking about with using language like comparing and how things are similar, using language with your child to help build a better context for understanding is important. So the more experience they get with these skills, the better they become. So when your child is talking about how things are different, that would be contrasting amphibians and reptiles. So you notice that's in the light blue section. That's how they are contrasting. That's how it's different. Now in the middle section where you see it's a little bit darker blue, that's when they're comparing the two topics. And when you talk about comparing, you want to use other words like how they're the same, how they're similar, to help build your child's I guess, understanding of compare and contrast, which is a huge term in all grade levels, being able to compare and contrast. Thanks, Miss Williamson.
Thank you. Another type of graphic organizer that I am going to share again is a timeline. And a timeline is just exactly what it is. It's a line where you can put the events in sequential order of how they occurred. So this is showing you a timeline of a short history of cereal. So if they were reading a book, what they could do is they could create a timeline of the events that have occurred in Jackie Robinson's life. You can also relate that to things that are going on in your child's life or into another person or something that they are researching or reading about, where they will create a timeline and put the events on the timeline in the order in which they occurred. So we hope that these strategies are some things that you can do. Again, they don't have to just be about a book. Again, you can relate them to your child's life, to things that have occurred in your lives. And all of these rich discussions are things that will help your child become more fluent readers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Miss Banks, and I'm the STEM coordinator. And I'm going to go ahead and share with you guys middle school, 6th through 8th grade book. Let me get it for you guys. There we go. Okay, so we have a science book. It's called Earthquakes, and pretty much this is geared towards middle school, but the strategies that I'm using are pretty much going to be somewhat the same. Some of them are going to be different, but they all can be used with regardless of the grade of the student that the child is in, and also whether they're an English language learner or they're a regular ed student. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. And as I scroll, we're going to most likely come to the table of contents. And I know that Ms. Hernandez and Ms. Williamson have already pretty much covered those. But one thing I just wanted to point out when it comes to middle school students is that the table of contents is really helpful because this is a time frame when they start learning about how to do research papers and so forth. And when they're writing a research papers don't tend to be generally broad. They tend to be generally distinctive in terms of specific things that they want to focus on. So a student might not want to read this whole entire book. They might just want to go ahead and focus on certain particular aspects of the book. So the table of contents will allow them to go to see what's there. So it'll help them determine if they want to go ahead and use this, if this book is helpful for them. And then of course, being able to go directly to where they need the information and to, time saving, go to that area, read that information and use that to go ahead and do their research. Okay. I also want to go on down and show you some things like captions. If you've noticed, this particular book has captions. Many science books do have captions where usually a caption is down here, this yellow area, where it says a powerful earthquake hit eastern Alaska in 2002. If you notice, the caption here is giving a brief description of what's going on in the picture above. And it can be a graphic because pretty much captions can just help out with whatever that illustrative purpose is there, letting the child know what is going on. Because looking at a picture, we can all go ahead and see a little bit, at least in this picture, what's going on to a certain extent, but it gives clear details just in case we're wrong. So we know what exactly, it gives us more helpful information to find out what's going on in the picture. But not just that, the picture is usually somewhat related to whatever the text is. So having that additional information helps with reading the text also. Okay. All right, so going down here below to this page 5, you'll notice also that we have another graphic here. This one's not really a picture, but it's actually giving a little bit more information about what the center of the earth is like. Obviously, none of us actually know what the center of the earth is like without these graphics. It would be hard for a child to understand. So it's nice to be able to have the graphic, explaining what's going on in the picture here so that people actually understand. And then especially when they go to the reading, they have a better comprehension, okay? The next strategy that I wanted to go ahead and talk to you about is context clues, okay? And I'm going to go to page 7 here. There we go. Okay, now I do know that Ms. Williamson mentioned context clues, and she would also referred it to a word that was in bold print. But every once in a while, we have children that they might not understand a particular word, regardless if it's bold print or not. So for example, here, I'm going to pretend like we're the second sentence here where it says one type of boundary. Actually, the first sentence here says boundaries. And then of course, the second sentence, says boundary. Let's pretend we don't know what boundary means, okay? And we're reading this, but we have no clue what it means. With some students, if they're not taught how to use context clues, they kind of get stuck. Some students are stuck where they just don't understand the sentence, and it kind of discourages students because if they don't understand what is being read, then obviously they're not going to want to go ahead and read, right? And then of course, at the same time, they're not getting whatever academic information is needed to be able to learn about what they're reading, right? So it's good for the students to know how to go ahead and read context clues. So let's pretend you don't know the word boundaries, right? So if you're reading with your child, it says, as the plates move, they interact at their boundaries in different ways. I'm going to use my imagination when I'm going ahead and I'm reading this. And one word, that action word, interact, tells me that there's some sort of interaction right there at the boundaries, right? With the second sentence, it says, at one type of boundary, the plates slide alongside each other. Well, that's telling me somehow that perhaps that boundary, it must, if plates are sliding amongst each other, it might be there in the middle. And as I'm reading some more into this, it says, at another type, the plates crash into each other. In this case, the edge of the plate may slide under another and be destroyed. So as you're reading, and then of course at the bottom, it says, as the third type of boundary, the plates move apart from each other. It's giving me really this concept that the plate must be like, or excuse me, the boundary must be somewhat in the middle. So just using those clues and reading helps me understand what that word might mean. I do know that we have glossaries, but we all know our children. Some of our children are the kind of children that are going to go to the glossary and look up that word. And others are just going to have to go ahead and use the context clues to try to figure it out, because some of our kids might not want to go ahead and take that extra step to go to the glossary, right? By looking at the captions here, this might even also help trying to figure out what the boundaries mean, because this caption is actually showing these pictures, speaking of the same plates right there. So to be truthful, it helps me know that the boundaries are right in the middle of these two plates right here. Okay, now that one might have been a harder one to understand. Let's go to page 9, and I'm going to show you one that maybe this term you might not even know yourself. And this term is called fissures. And hopefully, there it goes, it's popping up. Making sure. All right. If you notice in the second paragraph, second sentence, it says movement of melted rock and fissures beneath a volcano can trigger an earthquake. Well, fissures is not a common word that most people say. So fissures might be the word that they don't know. But using the context clues here, let me read the sentence again. Movement of melted rock and fissures beneath a volcano can trigger an earthquake. Well, to me, when you're thinking of it, if there's movement of melted rock, so it's something that's liquid and it's moving through something below this in the bottom of this, beneath this volcano, it might be like a tube or something that's allowing this liquid to move through, or perhaps a tunnel or a tube. So even though those words weren't said at all, I was able to try to use my imagination. I was able to use the words in the sentence, the other words, and to try to put a picture together of what it meant, this word fissures meant. I'm going to go to page 30 in the glossary, because when we looked in our table of contents, that's what we saw, right? We saw that, well, at least I saw that it was on page 30. Anyways, if you notice, you'll see that it shows fissures. Right down here, it's the fourth word, and it says a narrow opening or crack. And even though it's not exactly what the glossary said it was, if you notice, it's the same concept. So it allows the child to still understand what they're reading by using their imagination and trying to imagine, and using the words and the clues in the text and using their imagination to put together what the word means, okay? So that's how you go ahead and determine context clues. But I also wanted to go ahead and point out that this page here with the glossary, this glossary is created by the author, and the author figured that these were words that the students probably didn't know and that they would need to know, right? That they would, this would help them understand those words. But students can also put together their own personal glossary, because obviously all of our students have different experiences. They're all at different levels. And so even though the author thought that these words might be fit for the glossary, our students might have some extra words that they might actually feel they need a glossary for. It's very helpful for students to create their own personal glossary. Perhaps that word boundaries, which wasn't, in boldface, could go into their own personal glossary. Fissures could go into their own personal glossaries. And any other word, regardless of how simple we might think it is or how difficult we might think it is, can go there. It's just a glossary is for them and to help them and assist them in their learning. Okay. All right. So just as a reminder, all of these strategies that we all used, as well as I used, are not just good just for just middle school, even though I used middle school texts. They're good for all grades and totally, and whether, and also if they're ELL, like English language learners, or if they're regular ed, this is helpful for everyone. All right, thank you. All right, I'm gonna stop share.
So families, we thank you for joining us today for our overview of having a book walk and a book talk with your child using nonfiction texts. Now today we provided a few examples of nonfiction books such as animals, biographies, and earthquakes. But there are so many more other types of nonfiction reading material that you can bring into your homes. Things such as magazines, newspapers, and atlases. The bottom line is that it is just important for your child to be able to have books in their hands or information around them to learn from, and to be able to have a discussion to help build that deeper understanding and build background knowledge for your children. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Ms. Banks, myself, or Ms. Williams. Thank you so much and take care.